Hey everyone, it's Sarah, and we're back for another month in my reading journal. And so let's get into it. So, first of all, for the month of March, I read a ton of books. I read 12, which I think in January I read 8, February I read 9, and then March I read 12. And March was a busy month for me. So, I think it was just that in my free time, all I really did was read. I didn't watch a ton of movies, didn't watch a ton of YouTube TV shows, that kind of a thing. Um, so yeah, here is just kind of my monthly um, rundown, kind of messy rundown. And then getting into what I read, here are all of the covers. We'll go through them all in greater detail, but I read 4,685 pages and 14 books. And my favorite this month was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. So yeah, and it was a good mix. I read a lot of mysteries this month, but I did read some other genres as well. Mysteries are usually my favorite. Then I have my monthly overview. This one, I mostly used stickers from Peanut Butter Taco and Mojo Jojo Plans. Mojo Jojo, I used like her box stickers from the green boxes and more. And then all of these little books and currently reading stickers are from Peanut Butter Taco. And then the washi was just old from my collection, probably from Michael's from years and years ago. But yeah, just at a glance, you can kind of see. I used the darker green to put when I finished books, and then the lighter green for when I started books, as you can see here. And then here is just my monthly trackers. So I read most of the days in March, and then I denoted whether it was a book or an audiobook. This time I used a Tombow instead of a mild liner just because they didn't have the color I wanted, because I wanted that kind of rich green, not pastel green. And it worked out okay, but I think the mild liners work better for coloring those in. Then I have my March bingo from the Shelfie Chronicles. I got one bingo this month. Um, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it was mood reading, but I had, some holds come due at the library and things like that. So I wasn't really as focused on the March bingo. And then I actually set some goals this month. So I'm trying to start using some of these other sections in here. I read 2 physical books. Actually, I think I read more than 2, but that was my goal. I wanted to read the February book of the month. And then I participated in a readathon, which is also probably part of the reason why I was so successful in my reading this month. And then just kind of my messy notes section. A lot of times I make notes on post-it notes, just because I'm at work and I have them in my pocket. And then just notes as well for the bingo. So that was everything in this part of my reading journal. Now let's get into the rest of it. So here's my Goodreads tracker for the year so far. I'm at 29 books for the year, which is ahead of schedule. I said in April I'll probably slow down on reading a little bit just because I feel like I'm blowing it out of the water, and this month was kind of I'm getting a little bit burned out, if that is perfectly honest. Not that I just don't love books, but spending like all your free time reading books kind of gets to be a little bit a lot. So, anyways, let's start off with the Paris apartment. So the first 3 books I started in February, but I didn't finish until March. So the first one I have is the Paris apartment. This one was a thriller. I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't my favorite. So what happens? There's a girl that is going to stay with her brother in Paris, but she gets to his apartment complex and she rings the bell. He doesn't answer. She finds a way to sneak in, and her brother doesn't come back. And so she's trying to figure out what happened to him because she had just talked to him on the phone a couple of hours before she got to the apartment. And so, yeah, she is was expecting him to be there. And the apartment complex has a lot of odd characters. And so it goes to a couple of different points of view. also I didn't understand this apartment complex because it sounded huge, but then also there was only one apartment per floor, so I couldn't quite wrap my head around the layout of it. Um, so yeah, not my favorite, but it was okay. So then I read The Mysterious Affair at Styles. It's been a goal of mine for a few years. I love Agatha Christie mysteries in general, but specifically, Poirot is my favorite of her detectives. And so I've wanted to read all of her Poirot mysteries from the beginning. So, mystery number one is The Mysterious Affair at Styles. It was just a short one, 180 pages, but it's great because it just introduces you to him. And this one specifically was about a poisoning. So, at a, kind of a country manor, the room was locked, but she was found dead. What happened? And then Agatha Christie always keeps you on your toes. And then 4 stars on that one. The next one I read, I was disappointed in. I gave it 3 stars, but I really loved The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. So I was really excited to read this one. And it's a thriller with a bit of paranormal. And I don't know, the paranormal just got a little weird and it didn't quite make sense to me. And yeah, I don't know. I thought the title was misleading. So basically, you have Shay is the main character. She runs a blog, basically, or like a website called the Book of Cold Cases, and she goes over different cold cases and puts her research in there and things like that. She herself was the victim of like a kidnapping as a child, or and so she has a lot of um, I don't know, just interesting hesitancies in her life, and um, she's kind of a little bit afraid of certain things. And then she ends up running into Beth Greer, and she is like notoriously acquitted potential serial killer. She was dubbed the Lady Killer, and like I said, she was acquitted, but a lot of people still think she did it, and she's kind of a reclusive type that no one much knows about. After the trial, and it goes between their two viewpoints. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It just wasn't my favorite. I don't know. It just wasn't my favorite. So that was the Book of Cold Cases. Also, I got to the end, and the big reveal and everything, and I'm like, what the heck just happened? My husband liked it more than I did. We listened to it as an audiobook together. I also did The Paris Apartment as an audiobook as well. Then we did Malibu Rising. Loved Malibu Rising. It wasn't it was kind of one of those books that it's not necessarily I loved it so much I just read it again and again, but I really enjoyed it. It was really well written. I liked the way the characters all moved together, so I gave it 5 stars for that reason. I can tell it was a good book. So for Malibu Rising, it's the Riva children. There's 4 of them, and they're preparing for a party. They do a once a year huge party, so it goes from like the 24 hours of this party and the planning and everything. But then you keep getting flashbacks to their parents. So their dad is a rock star, and their mom was like kind of like forever in love with him, even though they break up a couple. They break up, get back together. He has a bunch of affairs, and so yeah, but it was a good, kind of family story. There's a lot of little subplots and side issues with the characters, but I really enjoyed that one. Also takes place in Malibu, so there's surfing is a big chunk of their interest as well. Then we have Someone Else's Shoes. This was our book of the month from February. My best friend and I are doing the book of the month um, each month because we each bought each other a subscription for Christmas. And then this one is by Jojo Moyes. And I've read another book by her that I really liked. So with this one, it's basically Nisha and Sam are two totally different people, but they go to the same gym, and Sam inadvertently takes Nisha's bag, and inside it has these super fancy high-heeled shoes. And Sam is kind of just a middle class, down on her luck kind of person. Her job isn't going exactly the way she wants. Her husband's out of work and is suffering from a lot of depression, and so she's kind of trying to hold everything together. But she puts on these shoes and she gets a bunch of big deals with her business. And then on the other side of it, Nisha is very wealthy, and she loses the shoes, and her husband tells her he wants a divorce, and she gets kicked out of her posh lifestyle, and she has no friends, no money, and she's trying to figure things out. Um, and it was just really fun, the story, and eventually they end up connecting, um, and doing some things together. But first, you have kind of these separate stories, and how they're each affected by losing or gaining the shoes. So it's really, I enjoyed that one a lot. It was a fun one. I read it in just mostly in one day. I read a little bit over the weekend, but then I did a big chunk of the reading on the last day that I needed to read it before book club. And then we have Murder on the Links. So that's my second Agatha Christie Poirot mystery. Again, uh, really good, 4 stars. And then this one, I don't think I've ever read this one. I've read Styles before, but Murder on the Links was interesting. I didn't know the links were a golf course. I thought it was going to be about trains for some reason. And again, you can just never go wrong with Agatha Christie, in my opinion. Then the next one I have was The Murder House. I listened to this as an audiobook, and I probably shouldn't have listened to it on the weekend that I did. My husband was out of town, and so it was a little bit creepy to listen to while you're home alone. And but no, I enjoyed this one. This one was a James Patterson, David Ellis novel. But it's about this seaside home that just has a lot of murders and um, interesting events surrounded by it. There's also kind of flashbacks. Um, this one was interesting because so they had flashbacks. There was also like a school shooting with a BB gun in the town. So it started off not how I expected at all, with this like BB gun school shooting, and then it jumps forward, 20 years or whatever. Um, and then you get into this detective, Jenna Murphy, has just moved to the town, and is investigating this murder, or helping investigate this murder that happened at this house. It was like a famous Hollywood executive and his girlfriend. And so you go through, they're finding the person guilty. And it's a little bit of, you know, um, everyone just, they just know he's guilty. They just, he's a troublemaker. He was the one that was, involved in that school shooting. So, everyone just knows it was him back in the day. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It gets into some other little plot twists. They have chapters that are from the murderer's point of view, which was really interesting. I don't know. I really enjoyed it. I devoured it in a weekend. So, if that tells you anything. Then the next one I have is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. This was my one-day read of the month. Again, it was for the book club, or not the book club, but the readathon from Creating & Co. She does a few different readathons or reading events throughout the year, and has stickers and everything for it. And so Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow was the group read. I also had that day off, which makes it easier for me to read a book in a day. This weekend I was reading a lot, but I also worked. So, just filling in my free time. But this one I had a lot of time to devote to it. It's about two friends from well, they met before college, but they reconnect in college. They were friends previously, had a falling out, and then in college they reconnect with each other and they decide to build this video game, and it's very successful, and then it's how they go from there to develop a whole company and future video games, and then how their different personalities affect their friendship, and things that they do affects their friendship. So it takes place over, a great span of time, 30 years or 20 years, something like that. But it was really good. I finished it and I immediately told my husband that he needs to read it because he really likes video games and I think he'd really enjoy this one. Also, it kind of made me want to play the video game just because they describe it in so much detail and everything. And I think that would have been a really cool thing if they had the video game with it as well. So 5 stars on that one. That was my favorite book of the month. Loved it. Then my next one is Going Rogue. This is a novel in the Stephanie Plum series. I don't know. I think it's like, 29. So I've read all of the Stephanie Plum books over the years. And so every year about Christmas time, she releases the next one. They're all kind of a tried and true formula. You've got funny characters. If you don't know who Stephanie Plum is, she's a bounty hunter. Um, and yeah, she's a bounty hunter, so she goes after um, bounties, obviously, people that have missed their court date appearance. But she's not your typical bounty hunter. She's messes things up a lot. A running joke, she destroys a lot of cars, and she often gets herself into these weird situations. And she has kind of a funny sidekick, Lula, who's really funny, and provides a lot of comic relief. There's a lot of donuts. There's a lot of fun going on there. But basically, with this one, the office manager has gone missing, and so they're trying to figure out what happened. And it's something to do with a coin that they took as collateral for the bond, or payment for the bond. I'm not exactly sure on how the terminology is, but basically, when you're giving something a value, to show that you're good for the money or whatever for the bond. But yeah, it's something to do with this coin, and so trying to track down this coin, trying to track down the missing office manager, and then also collecting some bounties. So they all are kind of the same in the general regard, but it's a good story. I like it. I'll keep reading them. I gave it 4 stars. Then we have The Underground Railroad. This was a historical fiction kind of novel. I listened to it as an audiobook and it was really good. This one actually won, I believe, the Pulitzer Prize. Yeah. And so obviously other people thought it was good too, but I gave it 5 stars. Sometimes it was a little hard to read just because there was a lot of obviously racism when you're talking about the South and slavery and the Underground Railroad. You have chapters that are from the slave that's running away, and you have chapters from the slave catcher as well. But this one was a really good. It was a really good book. Also, they had some interesting imagery where the Underground Railroad at times was an actual railroad, which was really interesting. And then there's also things that came up that I need to go and research that I'm like, I didn't hear that before. Like at one point they're in South Carolina and they were talking about how South Carolina was a little bit more progressive with some of the freed slaves, or I guess not necessarily, yeah, I guess freed, or apparently the government also bought slaves at some point, um, as well, like in an effort to free some of them. They bought them and they were owned by the government. So yeah, there were things that I just hadn't heard before that I still want to go and look up later. Um, but I really enjoyed that one. It was great. And the character, Cora, was really interesting as well, had a lot of complexity to her. Then the next one I have is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. wonderful story. I don't think I've ever read this one before, but I have seen the movie, even though it's been years since I've watched it. Coming of age story. You have Charlie, who's just a very, he has an interesting personality. He's very, um, he has an interesting way of seeing the world and everything. But he's going off to high school, and it's about the friends he makes. He makes friends with two seniors, Sam and Patrick, and um, he writes these letters to an anonymous person. You never find out who the person is, um, but it's kind of like his diary that the book is written in these letters and these stories. We listened to it as an audiobook, um, and yeah, it's a good one. If you've never read it before, it's not very long, 213 pages or 6 hours for the audiobook. But it was really good, and I enjoyed the audiobook narration as well. Then we have The Beautiful Ruins. Um, this one was okay. I gave it 4 stars. Could have been anywhere between 3 and 4. Um, so one of my favorite places that I've ever been, traveling wise, is the Cinque Terra, which is these 5 cities along the coastline of Italy. And this one I think is Vernazza on the cover. But you have these 5 cities. They're beautiful, they're very touristy. Well, it's about like the 6th city that doesn't exist, but in this book, it's like the 6th city that is, like the railroad has bypassed it. You can only get to it by boat. It's mostly old fishermen that are living there, but Pascal has this hotel that he inherited from his father because it was his father's dream to make this port a uh, another touristy spot. And so he is running this hotel, and this American actress comes, and they said she's dying, she has cancer. And so he, you know, gets her a room and everything. And it's kind of how their time at the hotel and his time in Italy unfolds. And then you fast forward, was it like 50 years or something? And you know, to the present day, and he comes back to try to find her later. um, so yeah, it was an interesting book. I read it for the readathon, so because it went between multiple points of view, or had flashbacks or something like that. It fit a prompt, and it's been on my shelf for years to read. But it was okay. It wasn't my favorite, but I still enjoyed reading it. Then we have The Teller of Secrets. This one, again, I just need a book to fit a prompt for my bingo so I could finish it. Or not bingo, this one was a different prompt. It was a buzzword challenge that I needed a book that had secret in the title. And this one I didn't have a quote for because it doesn't have very many Goodreads reviews. And so I think that no one has linked a quote to it. And since I listened to it as an audiobook, I didn't um, take note of anything to go back to and re-listen to and write down. So I did just write down the original title of Women and Frogs. This one was really interesting. Again, I struggled if I wanted to do 3 or 4 stars. There's a lot going on in this book. So it's a coming of age story. It's about this girl, Essie, growing up in Ghana. She's half Nigerian, so there's some political, you know, who is better, um, country wise, there. And yeah, it was an interesting book. So it's her coming of age. There's a lot of her like curiosity about her body and her sexuality, or just sex in general. And so she, and then her parents, I don't know, they're her dad and her stepmom are very like antiquated. And so like her stepmom, like there's a lot of like child abuse in there to some extent, or like what I would say is, you know, abuse, or like verbal abuse, or like her dad will call her stepsisters like dumb and things like that, or half sisters. But I don't know. It was interesting, and then I liked it more as she kind of was older, or you know, and her finding love, and losing love and things like that. Um, then again, too, there were also some political bits that were in the story as well. Like apparently, I'm assuming in the 70s, 80s, Ghana was going through like a political revolution, and so that almost took away from the story, or not a revolution, but a coup and everything. And so that kind of took away from the story because they were trying to weave in some of these political events that I just didn't think added to the story. I liked just her story about her figuring out herself more, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's why I didn't know if I wanted 3 or 4 stars, but I ended up with 4. Could have gone either way. Then the last one I have for this month was Murder in an Irish Village. This one was also for a bingo, so because I had to have a book set in Ireland. It was a kind of a cozy mystery. Not my favorite. It's just it was like a small town, and someone gets, uh, murdered, obviously, and the O'Sullivan six. They're 6 siblings that are orphaned because their parents died in a car accident, and one of their siblings is accused of the murder, and so the oldest daughter is trying to figure out what happened, because she doesn't think the police are doing enough because they're just blaming it on her brother. And so it's a lot of talking to other characters. I thought it was kind of a little bit boring at parts. That's why I only gave it 3 stars. Um, I enjoyed it, but it took me a while to read through this because it just didn't quite click with me, if that makes sense. And then it's a series. I don't know that I'm going to read the rest of the series either. Also, there were a lot of characters to keep track of, and that was kind of hard because they all had Irish names, and so in my head I couldn't quite say them or figure out how to say them. So yeah, that was everything I read this month. Then I went through and I filled out my challenges with what I've you know updated my challenges for the year. And then one last section I was going to show you. So this month, because I read the or did participated in the readathon, this was my little tracker for that. She had stickers that would go over each of the prompts. I don't know if you can quite see it, but those were all stickers to put on there when you finished books. And then here were my stats from that. So if you're interested in any of Creating and Co's readathons, I think they're a lot of fun. It's been a few years since I've done one, but it's a lot of fun. That she has a Facebook group where you can kind of track your stats and talk to other people about books or get ideas for prompts and things like that. So yeah, that's everything I read this month. Like I said, it was a lot of books, a lot of reading. I don't anticipate getting more next month. Or this current month, April. I would kind of like to slow down a little bit and do some other projects as well. That being said, I'll still probably read a fair amount because I'm traveling a lot, and so I'll listen to a lot of audiobooks when I'm going to and from places for work and for Easter and things like that. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed, and I will just catch you in my next video. Bye now.